Welcome back to Chat Chit. We're recording from Sunday night with 1.5 games still to go in round 6, and we're going to start by talking about the first game of the round, which I think is the best game to highlight of the round because one of the very best in the league absolutely tore the game apart.
Well, I thought before the game that Berry might have a go at him, and he did in the third quarter, but clearly it had zero impact. And we've seen the last few weeks that Dacos, the one we're talking about, has just been breaking tags. I mean, James Jordan was probably recognised as the best tagger in the competition at the time, and Dacos ran straight through him.
Yeah.
And we saw previously that Dacos was that guy you could go to and tag, but he's looking like he's figured out how to get off it. I mean, a goal 38 against Brisbane, extreme underdogs, missing Houston. This is the same Collingwood team as last year. There's been very, very few changes, if any, especially with Houston out. And they're able to do this against a flying Brisbane.
We were just talking about the fact that the Collingwood team from last week or the week before was the oldest team that has ever stepped foot on an AFL pitch.
They don't look it though.
It was something like 20 out of the 22 or 21 out of the 22 had 50 plus games. It might have been all of them apart from Ned Long had played 50 AFL games. So this is an experienced team that just took apart Brisbane at the Gabba, the reigning premiers in hot form at the Gabba, absolutely ran over them. And when we talk about Nick Dacos, who really was the story out of this game, it's clearly something that he's worked on. He was maybe the best player in the comp 2 years ago, and then last year in Collingwood's down year, Dacos, there were games where he was not able to break the tag. He was really restricted by guys like Finn McGuinness, Marcus Windhager, and it is clearly something that he's worked on really, really hard, and who knows how he can be stopped now.
You know what it is? He's using his speed more. He's a lot quicker than the guys that have gone to tag him, and he's getting those quick 1-2s. And it might look like he's just stat padding disposals when he goes for that quick 1-2, but he's just creating space for himself. He's an awesome kick. He always gets a goal, and he's comfortably the best player in the competition right now. And we're just watching Bont, who's currently on 20 disposals, 2 goals at half time.
Yeah, so it's one of them two. They're probably the two best.
Yeah.
So can't wait to keep watching them this year. We're going to jump straight into our top 5 players of the round so far. So even though Bontempelli is tearing apart this game, he probably won't feature.
Yeah.
But I'll start us off. In number 5, I've got a guy that I watched play live this afternoon, Zach Butters, who is back in action. And this was his 3rd game back from injury this season. And he has not missed a step. He really didn't put a foot wrong today. 85% efficiency for his 27 disposals, led the game in contested touches and tackles. And that shows that the sort of energy that he's bringing to this Port team that was struggling when he came back from injury this year, and suddenly they are a completely different team now that Zach Butters is playing.
It's just the way he attacks the ball. I wasn't able to be at the game. I was on a flight, but it's just every single contest, the commentator said it perfectly, it feels like it's the last time he's ever going to touch the ball. That's the way he attacks it. Every single time, over and over again. And also how clean he is.
He's a guy that I've always loved the tough midfielders. I love James Rowbottom and Luke Parker, Jude Bolton. These guys have been my favourites at the Swans. If Zach Butters was at the Swans, he'd be my favourite player.
But it's just guys that can do both, and they're quite rare, that you can go really hard at the ball and then dispose of it as well and use it. Like, I don't know if you caught the North versus Carlton game this week, but Wardlaw attacked the ball harder than I think I've ever seen anyone, but he's looked like he barely touched a footy in the last 6 months, couldn't kick it. Yeah. Decision making was bad, so you got to have both. Liberatore is another great option. But my number 5, I have Peter Wright. First game of the season, Essendon crying out for some more targets up forward, needed to win this game, and he stood up with 6 big goals.
I pulled the Aiden Poswell rule here, which is not picking someone if they're playing against West Coast.
That's fair enough.
But he absolutely deserves it with 6 goals. For my number 4, I've got a guy that I'd assume you have, that's Cozzy Pickett.
I also had him at number 4.
Had one of the great halves of the season. 4 goals in 12 touches, with pretty much all of them involved in a score in the first half of this game, where he led Melbourne to a big lead. It was a 3.5 goal lead over Fremantle and he was a huge part of getting Melbourne their first win of the year.
And looking just at the names in that forward line, he was the only one that I think had the capability to stand up and win that game for them.
It's worth mentioning that the other guy who's capable of really being a star in that Melbourne forward line is Bailey Fritsch, and he got dropped this week.
Yeah,
one of the bigger non-injury omissions we've seen in a while.
Surprising that he was omitted. I mean, he hasn't been playing well,
This is a guy who gets 7 goals for them in a grand final.
Yeah, hasn't been playing well at all, but to see the omission next to his name, I mean, they had to try and change something, but their best 2 forwards at the moment look like they're Pickett and Harrison Petty.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll go straight to number 3.
My number 3 is George Hewitt.
Same.
Right, do you want to tell us about George Hewitt's performance?
He's been really good this year. We've got a segment coming up about the most improved players, top 5 most improved players this year. But he's just doing it over and over and over again. And in this game, he was everywhere. Cripps didn't really feature too much in this game. Didn't really have to. But he's doing it both sides of the ball. I feel like he's defence first, but he's doing it so well on one side that he's almost forcing his way forward, and he's picking up goals. He's getting clearances. He's like one of the first names on that team sheet now, which you probably wouldn't have expected with Walsh, Chera, and Cripps, the other names in that midfield.
Well, he is absolutely reaping the benefits of the attention that gets paid to Walsh and Cripps, and then Hewitt and Chera as those complementary midfielders are absolutely taking advantage, especially in the last couple of games where Carlton's midfield has dominated 2 much weaker midfields in North and West Coast, but they have really stood up, especially George Hewitt, who it's hard to argue that he's not been the best midfielder in the comp so far this year, just doing it week after week. At my number 2, I've got Nick Dacos, who we just discussed.
Yeah, I had him at number 1.
Yeah, and who was your number 2?
Vlaston.
So Nick Vlaston, who I have at number 1, I don't know how many messages I sent to Aiden, but it was definitely an unhealthy amount. I was watching this Richmond Gold Coast game, and at halftime, I truly believe, so Richmond were up by 3 goals, right? I truly believed they would have been down 3 goals if it was not Nick Vlaston there and it was an average defender.
And I quote, I say this with confidence, Nick Vlaston has just played the best half of football that I've ever seen. Broke the all-time AFL VFL record for intercepts in a half. Lol, I didn't even check Snapchat, but he's on 116 points.
Supercoach.
Supercoach, yeah. Didn't even check Supercoach. Every time the ball has gone near him, he's intercepted it perfectly and had picked out an amazing kick to a Richmond player. Richmond were by 14 at half-time, and I honestly think that without Vlaston, they'd be down 20+.
Yeah, I don't care too much about the stats, because if you watched this game, it was unbelievable how Nick Vlaston played. But 13 marks with 4 of those contested, and almost all of those were intercept marks, not just chip kicks from his teammates. He just, time after time, quashed the Gold Coast attack, and these are big pack intercept marks as a mid-sized defender. Yeah. He plays so much taller than he is, might be the best mid-sized mark in the league alongside guys like Isaac Heaney and Patrick Cripps, but he really just was pretty much a sole reason. Him in the back line and Tim Taranto in the midfield were sole forces that led Richmond to a huge win over the only undefeated team left in the league before that game, which was Gold Coast.
I think that Noah Bolter coming back has a big part to play in his role, because he's almost been allowed to free himself up with Noah Bolter picking up the best defender. He doesn't have to play directly on a man anymore. He's able to just float around and sort of play the game that he wants to.
Yeah, we're about to move on, but my belief on Nick Vlaston the last couple of years is that if he was on a team that was competing for premierships or competing for finals the last couple of years, he'd be a lock All-Australian. But he doesn't get given that credit because his team's conceding so many points and he has a weak backline around him. I really hope he gets given that credit at some point soon. But we're going to move on now to our one-time segment for this week, which is talking about who we think are the most improved players in 2025.
I'll start us off straight from number 5. I'd Riley Thilthorpe at number 5. Looks like he's grown into his body a lot more. He's sort of developed year on year, but he's sort of one of the premier forwards in the competition now. And with those 3 tools in the Adelaide forward line, Taylor Walker's still firing now. It looks like he's reaping the benefits of having 2 other class forwards in Fogarty and Thilthorpe with him. But he looks like he's the main guy. I thought it was going to be Fogarty for the next 5-10 years, but the balls are being directed to him. He's taking big marks. He's really tough to go at it a one-on-one. He's great as a backup ruckman. So yeah, he's my number 5.
I've got him at number 3.
Okay.
I think he's been absolutely terrific, and especially from the perspective of a Sydney Swans fan, who we do not have a single tall forward that we can confidently put on our team sheet. Very, very jealous of a guy like Riley Thilthorpe. At number 5, I've got Ben Keys.
Okay.
Also on Adelaide, and he is one of my favourite players in the league because he always just brings energy. He plays wherever the coach wants him, And he has that perfect combination you want in a small forward of winning the ball, pressuring and tackling, and snagging goals. He's doing all of that beautifully this year. Just complements those three tall forwards at Adelaide so well, and has been incredibly impressive.
I like it. I didn't have him on my list. Number 4 might surprise you. I had Paul Curtis at number 4. He's the leading goal kicker as a small forward this year with 15 goals, averaging 14 touches as well. And I didn't really expect this from him. I always thought he was going to be that average sort of small forward that sits on a list for maybe 5 to 10 years. He picks up his 20 or 30 goals every year. High energy. He's gonna press. He's gonna run. But no, he's more than that. He could kick 40 or 50 goals this year. And if North are to actually be anything, we're going to discuss them a little bit later. I think he's going to be a big part of that.
Yeah, Paul Curtis has been amazing. I've mentioned him in an earlier episode this year as one of those North players that got thrown into the fire over the last few years and has made it out stronger, has proved himself, because a lot of small forwards have been given a run at North Melbourne. He's been by far the best over the last few years. At my number 4, I've got Sam Darcy.
I had him at 3.
Very unfortunate to see the injury as we're watching tonight, and we don't have the update yet. You probably will by the time this video comes out on the extent of that injury. But God, we're hoping that it's not serious, because he is, in my eyes, the best tall forward in the league already. From what he can do around the ground, the way that he crashes packs, and what his potential is. The fact that he's kicking this many goals while playing as sort of a wing tall, it's pretty unbelievable. And yeah, we're just hoping that he has a quick recovery.
Yeah, my number 3 was Sam Darcy.
And my number 2, I've got someone that there is just no chance you've got here, and it's Anthony Caminiti.
I didn't have him there.
At St Kilda.
I like the rogue picks.
Playing right now, he's leading the competition in marks this year, and these are not marks from chipping the ball around in the St Kilda backline. He has just been an aerial force, has had a complete change of role, being thrown as a key defender in the St Kilda backline, and he has just embraced it and has been really, really dominant in the air, and has just added to that St Kilda backline, sort of stepping in where Josh Battle was last year, but being even better. I think he's been magnificent, and it's great to see these guys that you don't really think too much of suddenly go into a different role and immediately be a much better player.
I like it. I'll go into my number 2. I had George Hewitt, who we discussed a little bit earlier. Now, stat for stat, he actually has better... And we talk about Dacos as the best player in the competition. He has better stats than Dacos. We know Dacos gets the attention, which is why we talk him up a lot more. But he's averaging 30 disposals, just under a goal a game, along with 7 tackles on average a game. Those are huge, huge numbers. Also, averaging 15 contested possessions. Those are massive, massive numbers. We always associated him with maybe a 20 to 25 disposal getter. He might play a bit off the half-back. He might chip in the middle, but he's a fully fledged midfielder now, and he's having massive impact at Carlton.
Absolutely. We've talked enough about him, but he's been amazing. My number 1 is Ben Long.
Oh, I like it. I didn't have him.
I can't believe that you don't have him. I think I might have let George Hewitt slip from my list, but Ben Long has just been something else. He's played at both St Kilda and Gold Coast as sort of swing, half-back, half-forward player that has sort of been fringe 22 for a couple of years, and then suddenly this year he's been chucked relatively deep forward, and I think is tied with Paul Curtis for most goals for a small forward. And the way that he clunks marks, in like contested marks, and the way that how crafty he can be around goal, he is one of the premier small forwards in the competition right now, without a doubt, and is on track for an All-Australian selection in that forward pocket. He's been absolutely amazing, and to me, it's come out of nowhere.
I like it. My number 1 is his teammate, Matt Rowell, who is already an incredible player in the competition, but I think he's just taken his game to another level, which is really tough when you're already a top player in the competition to go to that extra level. And I just think it's what he's able to do with the ball. He's not just a contest winner. He's now being able to pick it up on the outside and pick up targets. He's getting involved more. He's averaging 28 touches, whereas previously his max he's averaging 24. So he's getting a lot more touches in games. He's getting forward a lot more. He's impacting in more parts of the ground, not just a contest winner.
I think that's such a great point. He's always, since his first game, he had one of the great debuts in AFL as a number 1 draft pick. Yeah. But after that, when he had a bit of a weaker patch, people were questioning. There's absolutely no doubts about his ball winning ability, his toughness, and his energy and his fitness. It's about, can he be skillful enough and intelligent enough with the ball.
Well, it looks like he's gone away and he's done a lot of training in the off season to really lift that part of his game. And fair play to him, it's showing on the field. But we'll move into our next segment in hits and misses. I'll kick us right off. My hit for this week is just the upsets that we've had this week across the competition. I love it because as a neutral fan in a lot of games, you just sort of want the underdog to win. And in this week of footy, Brisbane were pretty big favourites against Collingwood at home. Got smashed. Essendon, it was a close game with West Coast. West Coast were winning for about 85% of that game, and they only just lost.
Melbourne first win of the year against a hot Fremantle.
Freo were huge favourites in that game. Richmond, Gold Coast. Gold Coast were looking to be the number one team in the competition potentially, but then Damien Hardwick couldn't get a win at Marvel Stadium. Look at Port Adelaide, Sydney. We're going to get onto that in a second, but Sydney were heavy favourites again in that game. Port beat them. And it's great for the competition when this sort of stuff happens, when it's balanced and teams aren't just running away. And a lot of the top teams lost this week and they've been struggling the last few weeks. So it creates a really, really healthy competition. Yeah,
to me, there was quite a clear top 7 or 8 teams in the league this year, which we'll get into when I talk about my power rankings. But they've been the top 8 in our last couple of videos. And pretty much every single one of those teams is now faltering, apart from Collingwood. So it's really exciting to see some of those teams that have slow starts just start beating those teams that you have high expectations for. My hit is that I think this year we're seeing a new generation of tall forwards that are breaking out. And probably my favourite type of player to watch, apart from that in and under tough player in the midfield, is a good tall forward. And I'll just read you some names of some tall forwards, some of which are very young, but some of which are just now breaking out as elite tall forwards in the competition. Sam Darcy, Riley Thilthorpe, both have been mentioned in this video. Darcy Fogarty, Josh Tracy, Jake Waterman, Ben King, and Nick Larkey. These are all guys now who are the best tall forwards in the league, along with more experienced guys like your Jesse Hogans and Jeremy Camerons. But these guys were not, apart from maybe a couple of them, they were not anywhere near this a couple of years ago. There's been massive improvement, and they are major goal kickers now, all averaging close to or more than 3 goals a game so far this year, which is really big numbers. So these are some guys that I find really exciting.
I mean, who doesn't love seeing a big forward crash the pack? And usually they do take a few years to grow into their body. So it's nice seeing players like Sam Darcy, who are taking a little bit less time. I just hope for the best that he's not out for a long period of time. Well, my miss is just North Melbourne as a footy club. A couple weeks ago on the podcast, I had them as my hit, and I talked them up in almost every segment as having a really stacked team. This is going to be the year, not necessarily to make top 8, but at least be 6+ wins, 7+ wins. But back-to-back games, they've gone lost by 82 to Carlton, which was a game I thought they could be an outsider to win that game. And they lost by 82, and it was embarrassing at points. They lost by 52 to Gold Coast at home. Gold Coast are a good side, but still, you don't really want to get blown out. Not at home, sorry, that was a gather round. And then they lost by 65 to the Swans. Again, people went into that game, Swans in dodgy form, thinking North Melbourne could actually potentially take something out of this game, or at least put up a fight for it. So it's really disappointing to feel like that culture at the club of not being able to win, or when things don't go their way, they almost just stop playing. They don't really know what to do when they go down by 20 or 30 points. Just the wheels fall off in the team. And they have a really stacked team. I mean, a few weeks ago we went through the names on their list. These guys are potential future All-Australians. They're top players in the competition. They have a top coach. But to get blown out by 82 at home against Carlton, who aren't having a good season in their own right at all, was quite embarrassing.
I think this is the season where they're no longer being given the excuse of young team rebuild. It's been a few years now, quite a few years, that they've been given that excuse. I think now they have enough talent on their list that's enough developed. One of the top coaches in the league, if not the top coach in the league, like they have it all now with some experienced guys to complement it. They don't have the excuse anymore, and now it's very disappointing when they fail. It's not just, oh, that's what's expected. They're expected to do better than this, and they're severely underperforming.
The AFL is built in a way that you shouldn't be on the bottom for this long.
Yeah.
It snakes up and down, which is why a lot of us love footy, that it's not just the rich teams. I know some stay at the top for longer than others, but it's not just the well-run teams that go up and down, like stay at the top. They move up and down and up and down. But if they can't win more than 5 games this year, right, I'm not really sure where to go. I mean, LDU just signed a big, long contract. I mean, he hasn't looked half the player that he was in previous years. But yeah, I'm not really sure to think about for North Melbourne.
Absolutely. my miss is another team that's underperforming, and that's the Sydney Swans. They do have, in comparison to North, they do have a couple of excuses for the start of the year. One being a new coach, but the bigger one being the injuries to really significant players in the team, namely Errol Goulden, Tom Papley, Justin McInerney and Lewis Melican, who have just returned this week. But Callum Mills, obviously the captain. But despite these injuries, the Swans are not playing good football, and I think there are some real worries within the Swans list. For example, the whole situation of the key position players right now, outside of Brodie Grundy and The Rock, is an absolute mess. We don't have a solid key defender or key forward that we know where they play on the field, and we know that they're going to be strong in that position. The one that we thought we had, which is Tom McCartan, is now being thrown forward, being thrown back.
That experiment has to be done.
Yeah.
That has to be finished. He was very, very ineffective in the forward line. He's tried it in previous weeks in the opening couple of games, was ineffective. We know he's more effective down back. We've had enough. I assume we're not going to see it again.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm very surprised that Dean Cox tried it again, because he's been not at the AFL level when he plays in the forward line. It's very, very poor, and he's a good defender. So the experiment has to end. There has to be a different solution tried. But just outside of that one thing, the Swans, they were inaccurate today, except I do think they played okay. But 2-4 as a team that is trying to prove that they don't have a grand final hangover, that they can just bounce back and be contending again this year, there'll be a lot of concerns around the Swans.
And they've got Gold Coast and GWS in their next two games, so they're going to really have to improve if they're going to take any points from those two games. We'll move straight into the next segment in the Footy Pyramid. Now, it's been a few weeks since we've done this, so with a few weeks comes a few changes. Moving out of the pyramid is Will Day. Unfortunate, he's injured. Finn Callahan, he's moved out of the pyramid. He started on top. First 2 weeks, he was on top of the pyramid. And since then, bar this week, had an okay game. I think with Tom Green's return, he hasn't got as much ball, hasn't been as damaging. And Tristan Sherry's fallen out of the pyramid as well. That could just be, I think it's just a lingering injury that sort of prevented him from being dominant in games. I think TDK smashed him in the game, regardless of what the stats looked like. I think he really got on top of him. In the fifth tier, Nick Larkey's going to hold his spot. I think with more service, and I mean, he missed a sitter in the game as well, but with more service, and if North Melbourne lift their game more and he gets one-on-one opportunities because they transition the ball quickly, he's going to kick a lot more goals. Lachie Neale's going to move down a tier into the fifth tier. Matt Rowell is going to enter the pyramid, I think, for the first time. Rankin is going to drop a tier into the fifth tier. Looked like he could potentially have a crack at the Brownlow in the first few weeks, playing out of the middle, kicking goals. But just isn't having as much impact across the whole game. Teams are sort of realising that you have to pick him up around stoppage. He's not just getting the ball and being able to run and do as he please anymore. And Jack McRae is going to hold his spot in the fifth tier. He's just picking up big numbers, and they're not just pointless numbers. He's actually having a lot of impact. Into the fourth tier, we have three new entrants in the fourth tier. We have Andy Brayshaw.
Been amazing.
Been incredible. He's in the fourth tier. Zach Butters comes into the pyramid. Goes straight into the fourth tier. Patrick Cripps moved down a tier. He's now in the fourth tier. Isn't having as much impact as you might have expected him to. He did play a bit of forward time, so his stats don't look as good as they used to. And Jack Sinclair is going to also join as a new entrant into the pyramid in the fourth tier. Been
absolutely amazing this year.
Not a lot of changes above that. Heaney moves up into the third tier. I think he's been one of the only shining lights, along with Bison and a couple others at the Swans. Look like he's putting a lot of effort, and you can see the talent.
And the only one who could kick straight today.
Yeah, 100%. And staying with him in the third tier is Tom Liberatore and Sam Taylor. They're going to hold their spots. In the second tier, no changes. Noah Anderson and Zach Merritt are going to hold their spots. And Nick Dacos is going to be on top. And I've just put a little note here. Bont is on watch.
Well, yeah, but where have we got Bont?
No, he's not on the pyramid yet.
I think next week, I mean, we're currently sitting, it's 3/4 time, and Bontempelli already has a best on-ground performance.
Yeah. And that's first game of the season. So don't be surprised if you see him in the pyramid after just 2 games in the season.
Yeah.
We'll move straight into the power rankings.
The power rankings for this week. Now, everything has come together to mean that there are going to be some huge changes this week. The reasons, it's been 2 weeks since we last did the power rankings.
Yeah.
And the second reason is that there have been major upsets and just complete turnarounds in form within these last 2 weeks.
And let me just say, he was going through it trying to make these power rankings because every team at the top is failing at the moment.
Yep. So at 18th, this is a team that's not changing, and it's West Coast. Not much to say. It's going to be another bad year for them. In 17th, huge drop here from 11th 2 weeks ago is North. I shouldn't have had them at 11th, if I'm being honest with myself, but I had really high hopes because I do think that when you look around at this list, they should be somewhere like 10 or 11. In 16th, I have Richmond moving up with their huge win this week over Gold Coast. In 15th, I have Melbourne, stopping Richmond from jumping higher by getting their first win of the year this year. And I think if you compare those two teams, Melbourne is a team that actually has some experience and a level of talent at this point where they could make some sort of charge in some world that Richmond couldn't make. Then we've got Carlton. Some people might have them higher. They've got a percentage of 122 and have 2 huge wins in a row. But these are wins against West Coast and North Melbourne.
I think there's some stat. It's like their last 8 or 10 wins have been against only North Melbourne, West Coast, and Richmond.
Really?
Something like that.
Yeah.
I'll try and find it for the next week's podcast. But the teams they beat in their last 8 to 10 wins have only. I think it's only been those 3. But I'll come back.
When you lose your first 4 games, we're going to need you to do more than just beating North and West Coast. They've done their job the last couple of weeks, but I'm going to keep them down here until they take a big scalp. Next up, Essendon. So this is around where they sat before. They've gone up 1 spot with an important win this week against West Coast. They've the last 2 weeks they've gotten wins that they needed to get. At number 12, we've got St Kilda. Now, St Kilda have had 2 really bad performances in a row. If we include this current game against the Bulldogs, which they will very likely lose with a big margin, but they showed a lot of promise in the weeks leading up to that, and will give Ross Lyon a bit of room to cook. In 11th, we've got the Sydney Swans, who we discussed earlier, and they're in poor form. To be fair to them, played some very good footy in around stoppage and in our defensive line for much of the game today against Port Adelaide, but not converting goals is not good enough, and that's a part of footy, and they didn't do it well.
Can't kick 10 goals, 17 and expect to win games.
Absolutely. Especially when I think the last 6 scoring shots we had were behinds or something like that.
It was this disgusting final quarter.
Yeah.
Anyways.
In 10th, we've got Fremantle, and I'm feeling very, very proud that they were 0-2 against not-so-great teams to start the year, and people were jumping right on them, and I said, yes, they're playing poorly, but this is an elite list. This is maybe a top 4 to 6 list in the competition. Once guys like Sean Darcy and Hayden Young come back, they're going to be strong, and they look strong now. They didn't get a win this week against Melbourne, but had 3 wins in a row leading into that game. Next up, the Western Bulldogs in 9th. And as we always say, this is about where they sit, 8th or 9th. It's always about making finals for them, and they want that to change. But give credit where credit's due, playing very good footy as we speak.
And I can almost guarantee you come around 24, they'll probably still be the 9th in the power rankings.
Very likely. It's a sad prospect for Bulldogs fans. Next up, we've got Adelaide, who have looked very, very strong to start the year, and they've got a big win against GWS at Adelaide Oval, but losses in the 2 previous weeks against Geelong and against Gold Coast make you wonder about their defensive line. They've had some guys that are standing out at different points, except out of those teams near the top, they're conceding by far the most points, more than, I believe, any of the teams that we've got above them. So I'm going to hold them here until... unless we see some sort of change in their defensive consistency. Next up, Gold Coast.
Unfortunate. Could have been number 1.
I wanted to have them at number 1 if we recorded a video last week. They got a huge win over Adelaide. They were the last undefeated team. This is finally the year for Gold Coast. Everyone's wanting to see them succeed. Stacked list everywhere. And then they pull out a loss against Richmond this week. A team with probably an average age of 16.
Pushing it.
It's absolutely crazy. They got dominated by Taranto and Vloston, and they did nothing about it. I don't know if there'll be too many question marks about this game. Might be one that they just try to forget because they have a very good list and they've been playing amazing football. Next up in 6th, we've got Brisbane. Got dominated at home this week, as we discussed earlier, by Nick Dacos and the Collingwood Magpies. And yeah, getting beaten like that at your home ground is not a promising sign, but it's really hard to know where to place these teams because all 3 of these teams can very feasibly, in 6th, 7th, 8th, could very feasibly win the competition this year. There's just a lot of teams faltering at the top. Not sure what to do with them. Then in number 5, we've got Port Adelaide. Now, this is probably the biggest jump we've ever had in Power Rankings history. Since we last did Power Rankings, they have had Zach Butters back and healthy.
Yeah.
They have had a move in position from Connor Rozee, moving to the half-back line, where he's been the best half-backman in the league over the last 2 weeks. They have had Jason Horne-Francis hit hot form. With those 3 combined, we've...
Georgiades as well.
Yeah.
Been massive last few weeks.
Very good point. As has Sam Powell-Pepper, who we know is an absolute raging bull, and when he's in form can be a force to be reckoned with. All of that has combined, along with Elia and Radagalier doing a great job down back, beating Hawthorn, the title favourites, by 30, and then taking down Sydney at home. So these are 2 enormous wins that they've had since we've last done the Power Rankings, and I've just decided in my head, and I think a lot of people have, Port are contending for finals this year, and if they get there, they're as good as anyone, or they're very, very much up there. 4th, Geelong. And I think it's fair that they stay in the top 4. They play tomorrow on the Easter Monday, and they got a big win against Adelaide last week, but they sit at 3-2, and it's a very important game tomorrow against Hawthorn to see if they jump up to that 1 or 2 spot, or if they sort of sit just outside the top 4. Next up is GWS. Yes, they lost this week, but you look at the list, it was a very wet game this week. They won't play many more like that. Wet, scrappy. Adelaide did a very good job, and I don't really care too much when I look at GWS and their prospects this year. They're loaded, playing great football, healthy. I think they have a great chance of winning it all. In second, we have Hawthorn, meaning that there is a new spot at the top, but it should be mentioned on Hawthorn that they had a loss last week against Port Adelaide.
Embarrassing loss.
Embarrassing because I think they
were down by about, I think at halftime was 59 points, but it was more than that at one point.
Yeah, they recovered it on the scoreboard, but Port left their foot off the gas a little bit, and Hawthorn were in bad shape in the huge rivalry match there, the grudge match. Then at number 1, we've got Collingwood.
Fine home.
They're the only team that has not faltered in the last however many weeks. They had a big loss early in the competition. In round 0, they got pumped by GWS.
Yeah.
And then since that point, they've not lost a game.
They've not looked back.
And they've had some big challenges. They've not had an easy run. They had Port Adelaide, who they beat by 90. They beat the Bulldogs, who are looking good now. Then they had a bye, took care of Carlton, took care of the Swans, and then got a huge win against Brisbane at the Gabba. That is a very difficult run. They've had one of the more difficult runs this year, if not the most difficult, and they're top of the table. So they deserve to sit at number 1. And can they prove that an experienced team, the most experienced and oldest team in the league this year, can win it all?
Well, that was their idea, but when coming into the season, the idea behind Houston and not going for a full-fledged rebuild was, we think we've got the team that can go again, and they're showing it at the moment.
Yeah, someone that hasn't been mentioned, just before we finish, Steele Sidebottom. If the season ended right now, he'd be the All-Australian winger, the first All-Australian winger selected.
Yeah.
I don't think we can put him as most improved because he's been an All-Australian before.
Yeah,
he's
I looked
played,
at him, but it was really tough to place him. Same with Dangerfield.
He's been around for 15 years at least, so still Sidebottom you can't put as in the most improved this year. He's always classy, but he is in some ridiculous form.
If he continues this form, he could very well be All-Australian.
Oh, without a doubt. He's
100%.
been All-Australian before, not too long ago.
Oh, no.
Without a doubt.
I know that, but which other wingers, just off the top of your head, are competing? Dan Brosio hasn't been anything like the player he was last year.
And Errol Goulden's been injured.
Who's usually going to go lock for the wing for the next, I don't know how many years, isn't going to be All-Australian because he's missed probably too many games.
Yep.
So, off the top of my head,
it's still Sidebottom.
And there's 2 spots. So
Steele and Sidebottom.
So Sidebottom, I don't know how old is he now?
I'm gonna guess 33.
34.
Okay.
34, playing on the wing. It could very easily be All-Australian this year. We'll get back to it when we do All-Australian predictions. Might be an interesting chat in about 10 weeks' time. But yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.